Imagine living in a quiet neighborhood where the barking of dogs is a constant background sound. But then, something sinister begins to happen. One by one, the dogs start disappearing without a trace. This is the mystery that led Julia and her neighbors on a desperate quest for answers, turning their once cheerful street into a place of silence and fear. Before we dive into this suspenseful story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Don't miss any of our mystery-filled stories. And if you've ever experienced something strange with your pet, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. It all started on a quiet night. Julia had just put her dog Max to bed and was preparing to relax after a long day. Max, usually calm, seemed unusually restless, barking at the front door as if there was something or someone outside. Thinking it was just a stray cat or some other nocturnal animal, she thought little of it. But when she woke up the next morning, Max was nowhere to be found. Surprised, she called out for her dog, but the house was silent. She checked the door, still securely locked, and saw Max's collar hanging right where she left it. Confused and worried, Julia went out searching for him. She scoured the neighborhood, questioned her neighbors, and looked in every corner, but there was no sign of Max. It was as if he had simply vanished. In the days that followed, the same thing happened to other neighbors. Other dogs started to vanish in the same mysterious way, without any sign or noise in the middle of the night. More and more dogs were disappearing, and the once lively, noisy street turned eerily quiet. The barking that used to fill the night was replaced by silence and growing fear. Julia, confused and troubled, began to suspect that something more sinister might be happening. Trying to understand what was going on, Julia organized a neighborhood meeting. As they spoke, they realized that all the disappearances happened at similar times during the early hours of the morning, without any sign of break-in or struggle. The dogs seemed to have vanished without a trace. The discussion left everyone anxious and suspicious, and Julia, determined to solve the mystery, decided to investigate on her own. That night, Julia stayed up, watching the street from her window. Armed with a flashlight and her phone, she was ready to capture anything unusual. But on the first few nights, nothing happened. The neighborhood was quiet, and the street appeared as peaceful as always. Then, a few nights later, she heard something strange, a faint whisper, like the sound of a breeze moving through the houses. It was unsettling, almost as if there was something watching. Growing more anxious, Julia installed security cameras around her home, hoping to capture something that would explain the strange events. She managed to convince a few neighbors to do the same, and soon several houses on the street were under surveillance. But the footage showed nothing unusual, just the dogs leaving their homes, drawn outside as if they were following some invisible force. It was as though something was calling them, but there was no logical explanation. The situation began to take a toll on the residents. Julia started researching similar cases online, looking for any stories that might shed light on what was happening. She found stories of other places where animals seemed to vanish mysteriously, as if lured by forces no one could see or understand. Some claimed animals could sense presences, and that this drew them away from their homes. Although details varied, the cases shared one thing in common: none of them had been solved. Convinced something was very wrong on their street, Julia decided to stay up another night, watching the live feed from the cameras. Around 3 in the morning, she noticed a shadow moving down the street, subtle and quick. It was something large enough to cast a shadow, but too undefined to identify. The brief glimpse of it sent a chill through her, but it only made her more determined to find the truth. In the following days, Julia enlisted the help of a few neighbors to watch the cameras with her. They started to notice that the dogs always disappeared in the same direction, heading toward an old, abandoned house at the end of the street, a place the neighbors generally avoided. According to the neighborhood's oldest residents, the house had been abandoned decades ago after its last owner died alone. He was a solitary man known for caring for dogs and behaving somewhat strangely. After his death, no one took ownership of the property, and it quickly fell into disrepair. Over the years, rumors began to circulate that his spirit was still there, calling the dogs to him. Unable to ignore this lead, Julia and a few neighbors decided to explore the house during the day. As they entered, they noticed the place was colder than the rest of the neighborhood, as if it had been preserved in time. In the living room, they found strange marks on the walls that, at first, looked like scribbles. But upon closer inspection, they realized they were drawings of dogs, etched into the walls as shadows. The most disturbing part, however, was in the basement. There, they found a makeshift altar with extinguished candles and old photographs of dogs. It seemed the previous owner had a fascination with animals, though no one knew why. The group left the house feeling a mix of fear and awe, sensing they were now more entangled in the mystery. Despite their attempts to uncover the truth, the disappearances continued. Some residents began to believe that the man's spirit was still in the house, claiming the dogs for himself. Others thought some unexplainable force, beyond human comprehension, was at work. Previously skeptical residents started to avoid walking their dogs at night, and a few even moved away, fearing for the safety of their pets. Today, the street where all the dogs disappear is known locally as the Silent Street. Over time, few residents still keep dogs, and those who do live in constant vigilance, afraid their beloved pets might also vanish. Julia, one of the few who stayed, still keeps cameras installed, always hoping to find an answer. But so far, the mystery remains unsolved, and the feeling that something strange lurks on the street lingers. And you, have you ever faced anything as unexplainable as what's happening on this street? Share your story in the comments, subscribe for more intriguing mysteries, and send this video to someone who loves a good suspense. Maybe one of you has a theory to solve this enigma.